I hope you're surviving. So listen, I know Zoom isn't necessarily the best kind of format for participation and back and forth, but I really like the chat box. So I want you guys to feel free to kind of jump in there and, ask questions if you have them, when you have them, so that I can kind of answer them in real time. And if something comes up that I'm not able to get to right away, just know that I will get back to that question as we go through. So why cave paintings? When I was thinking about how to give this talk or where I really wanted to start, I guess I started at the very beginning. And I want you to kind of hold on to this thought and keep this with you as you're preparing for your presentations, okay? And that is that we've been giving presentations for a really, really, really long time as humans. Some of the oldest cave paintings have just recently been found, have been more than 50,000 years old. So we are not new at this, right? We used to gather around and listen to stories to be kind of surprised and, learn about the day and the world around us through stories. So at the heart of what you're doing when you're giving a presentation is you're telling a story. You're telling your story, right? But you're still telling a story. So the same things that were important 50,000 years ago are important now, right? First is connection with your audience, which is hard to do via Zoom, right? But connection with your audience, eye contact, things like that. And you want to make sure that your story is understandable, that your job is to communicate your story. So we're going to talk about what goes where in a scientific presentation today. And we're going to talk a little bit about your slides because they've kind of taken place of the cave paintings as our kind of supporting material when we give talks. And a little bit about how you can best prepare, right, to kind of enter in to what can sometimes be a scary idea, right, communicating your ideas in public. So like I said, this is just a reminder for you guys to pop in and chat with questions as we go through. I'm like literally begging you to do that, okay? One of the first tips that I'm going to give you is to make sure that you are prepared. To kind of give your audience a really good roadmap to your talk. No one likes to kind of be sitting in the audience going, what is happening? Where are we? What's going on? What time is it? How long is she going to be up there? You want them to feel kind of comfortable enough to relax and listen to you. And part of that is then knowing where you're going. So I did that for you, my audience. See, I'm taking care of you already. First, we'll talk a little bit about the anatomy of a research talk. So that is the what goes where kind of portion. And then we'll talk about how to prepare for your talk, how to prepare your slide deck and get everything in really good shape. We'll talk a little bit about ways to practice and why it's super important. And then we'll finish up with kind of the big day and what to focus on during your delivery for your talk. So I'm just going to get right into kind of the key pieces of a research talk. And we start with the introduction, we'll go into methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. So regardless of your field or the specific type of research that you're going to be presenting on for a research talk, those are the big ones. There might be some variability depending, but most talks are broken up into those kind of target areas. So today I'm going to be kind of using some example slides as we go through, just to give you an idea of what works and what doesn't. Does anybody know what this is a picture of? You can type it into the chat if you want. Take a guess. This is a Florida panther. So same species as a mountain lion or a puma. This is a subspecies and it's native to Florida, and it's extremely rare and highly endangered. And so this is an example of what might be a really great title slide, okay? For one thing, you want to think about the image on your title slide. It might be up there for a while. So that title slide might be up there while they're transitioning from one speaker to the next. So you want it to be an image that draws your audience in before you even started talking. You want to make sure that anything on there is nice, clear, clean, easy to read. PowerPoint has lots of kind of designers. We'll talk about those in a little bit that can help you come up with a really nice slide. I'm going to pop out of slideshow mode real quick. Now, can you guys still see my screen? Yeah, I think I'm still. Perfect. I just wanted to show you something cool. So a lot of times I like to work with white font, and that can be difficult to do on an image like this. And I just wanted to kind of show you guys behind the scenes here. This is just a transparent overlay. So you can create one of these for any slide you want to kind of darken the image. It makes it a little more dramatic. And that means if you choose to use a white font instead, just becomes a lot more readable. And all this is a shape that I've inserted. So you just come up here, you insert the shape. And in this case, let me show you. When you go to the design mode, where am I? Format, shape fill. So it's just a regular black fill, but then you just use this more fill colors and you've got this transparency option. So you can make it really dark if you wanted to, or kind of in between. And that's what is selected here, is kind of this in between mode that darkens everything up. It's a great tip. I use this all the time. So that's just the first of many, hopefully, that you'll see. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and leave this in this mode because there's some other things that I want to show you. And I think having this PowerPoint toolbar will be helpful as we kind of move through. Okay, so what you'll see over the next few slides is I kind of have this set up with red borders and green borders. In my mind, I was thinking you would have access to this PowerPoint. So Lee, I can make sure that you have a copy of it. Because there are several slides that are like just checklists for you, really good things to think about and go through as you're putting your talks together. Not necessarily great for PowerPoints and presentations, but a really good reference for you. So one thing that I did is I kind of blocked out these slides. What you see in red is kind of like, nice try, but I think we can do better. And then you'll see some later that have a kind of green outline to it. And those are the ones that are kind of like, okay, this meets like the Mountjoy specifications of a good slide. I've walked many students through this process of giving a talk. And so the examples that I'm providing for you are not to be like, oh, look how silly these students are making these mistakes. It's just, this is how it starts. This is how we all start, right? Figuring things out. And so I don't want you guys to feel like I'm being disparaging, because I have wonderful students and everybody works really super hard. And I know that, but there are some easy things we can do to help refine your talks. And it starts with the intro. A general background slide is not uncommon to see in an introduction. This is where you're giving your kind of your literature review. You're showing that you're an expert. You're saying, here's all this really interesting information about my topic, kind of proving your chops, right? In this section, you want to make sure that you come across as knowledgeable. So what students tend to do is overload this with a whole lot of content. It's not unusual to see slides like this where, you know, you've done a bunch of research, you're really proud of it, and you want to show it all, right? And not just show it all, but you want to kind of use normal kind of textual language when you do that. And what I'm going to challenge you guys to do throughout your talks is to really limit the amount of sentences you actually use. This isn't about sentence structure, right? You're using your slides as kind of backup for you. Right? They're not meant to drive home the message. That's your job. Your slides are meant to kind of help you and your audience through the material. So looking at a slide like this, you can see a couple things kind of right off the bat. One, this is a theme. We'll talk about what themes can end up doing and how they can get in our way a little bit as you guys are putting your slides together in a minute. Right away, there's way too much text and it's way too small, right? So your audience is going to be wanting to read every point, and they're not going to be listening to you. They may or may not be able to read every point. So that's an issue here as well. The other issue I kind of have highlighted the eyes here. Whenever you have images on your PowerPoint slides, you want those images pointing towards the inside of the slide, not off somewhere else, right? You want to focus the attention to what you're talking about. So make sure that you keep that in mind. That's a really simple fix though, right? So like, let's say you really loved this picture for whatever reason, you can just quickly flip that around. And now our Panther is looking at least in the right direction. So that's one improvement. So what I've done is kind of taken those points and presented them in a way that I think is more, is easier, at least for your audience, to kind of look at your slide and listen to you at the same time. Okay. I put the scientific name at the top and then key points as bullets throughout. And I have left nothing off. Everything that's here is here. It's just larger. You don't see any periods, right? I'm making points like this. I'm not making points like this. Okay, you do that. Your slides should be doing this for you. Okay, so keep that in mind, especially in the introduction when you're going into your literature. Okay, I also have the sources cited down here in the corner. You guys can see that there. You don't have to do it this way. Your advisor might have a particular way that they want you to do your citations. Maybe it's after each one, right? So if a particular person was responsible for this one, you might do it right after that, and that's fine. Okay, that's perfectly appropriate. This is just another way. It kind of helps keep things a little bit cleaner. I tend to go with this method instead of each and every point, unless I feel like it's really important. So this is really up to you, but I did want you to understand that that's an easy option that you can use, especially when you're reviewing a bunch of literature. When it comes to your research questions, I want you to kind of think of an hourglass, right? When you're thinking about scientific research. And this holds true whether you're writing a paper or giving a talk or creating a poster, right? Scientific research is almost like a perfect hourglass. You're going to start really big and broad, right? You're going to be thinking about the things that are important for your topic and how your topic interacts with what we know about something, right? How it interacts with the scientific literature. And then you're going to get more and more and more narrow. Okay, as you move through your literature review, you're ticking those boxes, covering everything that your audience needs to know. Then you get down there at the bottom and you're getting to your stuff, your research questions, right? Your methods, your results. And then it's going to branch back out at the bottom, right? Just like an hourglass. And then you're going to end up getting back into the literature and putting your research in context. Okay, so if you're thinking about things in those terms, we're kind of getting right here towards the middle of that hourglass when you come to this part of your talk. Okay. You should have already set yourself up as an expert. Your audience should understand all of the important pieces that relate to your specific research question at this point, okay? This slide, or slides, if you need more than one, that's totally fine. But these slides need to be nice, clean, and clear, okay? Don't muscle them up with a bunch of stuff. Your research question should be clean and obvious. Your hypotheses, if you have more than one, right, you want those numbered. And again, you want those clean and clear. The reason this is so important is you're setting up the rest of your talk here. The order of your methods will follow the order of your questions and your hypotheses. The order of your results will be the same. The order in your discussion will be the same. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're kind of setting up a perfect outline. This next slide is really just a checklist for you guys to go through when you're putting together your introduction. Okay, we talked a little bit about that eye-catching title slide. Make sure you're paying attention to the authors that need to be included here. Did you work with a group? Did you work by yourself? Should you include your lab mentor or lab assistants? All of those good things need to be kind of taken into account. Be sure you provide a roadmap for your audience. Remember, with your literature review, you're going to want to add a whole bunch of stuff. You might have to hold back a little bit there, right? Make sure you're establishing yourself as an expert. You need to provide your audience everything they need to understand your question, right? But don't overdo it, right? Try to kind of stay in your lane, right? Remember, you should be getting more and more and more narrow as you move through the first few slides in your introduction. Make sure that you hold back, not just because there's not room in your PowerPoint and because you don't have enough time, but you always need to be speaking from a place of knowledge. You need to know way more than what's on your slides. You need to know way more than what you say necessarily, right? You have to bring added content to your slides. So holding back on what you put on your PowerPoint slides allows you to do that, right? Allows you to be the star of the talk, keeps the slides from kind of taking over and taking precedence. In a perfect world, by the time you get to this slide, this research question slide, your audience should go, yes, I get it. That is an important question. I know that's my question now too, right? You're leading them down this path and you should get them to the point where they are right there with you when it comes to this research question. Of course, you should ask that question. There's this huge gap in the literature. You have explained all of this stuff to me so well. I know exactly what's coming. Okay, so your audience should feel that way when you get to that slide. The last little piece is probably the most important, and this is make sure that you know your audience. And now you might be talking to a general audience who's interested in learning or in research or in your particular discipline, or maybe even a really, really narrow part of a subdiscipline of a discipline. Okay. All of those different audiences are going to have different expectations for what you include in your talk and how scientific you are with your language. So keep that in mind. You might have to smooth things out a little bit for a more general audience. You might have to pump things up a little bit more for a really kind of highly technical, highly knowledgeable audience in your field. So you should be able to toggle that back and forth and be aware of what you need to do depending on your particular audience. Okay. When it comes to methods, it's funny. I think this section is deceptively difficult. And it's for similar reasons that I think the literature review is hard. You know, you spend a ton of time in the lit on your topic and you want to show everybody how much you know. Methods is kind of the same way. This is what you've done. So you might have spent weeks in the lab or months in the field, and you have done a lot of work and you are really proud of it. And let's be honest, the methods involved in scientific pursuits, this is the bulk of why it's hard, right? You have to make a bunch of different decisions about what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. There's lots of trial and error involved. You know, you might have gone down one direction and had to circle all the way back and then gone down a different direction, right? So there's a lot of like pride in this piece because you have figured things out and you have some results, and that's great. But you have to understand that your audience just needs the nice, clean story, okay? There's a reason that so many freshmen come in and think that science is just checking the boxes and you do things in order and then you get something every time. Once you get into it, you realize that's really not true. But the reason it looks that way is because that's what's in our presentations and that's what's in our papers, right? Is this kind of streamlined path. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you get to your methods. Again, you give the audience everything they need, but they don't need extra stuff. Okay? They don't need the mess ups. They don't need the hemming and hawing and the issues and the problems. That'll come up later, but not here. This is a kind of typical slide that I might see for methods, just a bulleted list of the things that I did, right? So we have like a theme here too, right? Some things, a little circle and dashed lines. There are a couple of things that you can do to make your method slides a little more approachable for your audience. And again, to guide you as the presenter, you're the storyteller here. You want these to be a guide for you. They should be support. They shouldn't be telling your story. This slide tells the whole story. Okay, and that's not what we want. So instead, think about using a lot of flowcharts and diagrams and lists in your method section. Here, I have taken this basic information and I stripped a lot of the do not need to know stuff out of it. And I've given just kind of a quick little flow chart from step 1 to the last step here to monitor for recovery. This is a list of how we tagged panthers, right? How we got the data that you're getting ready to kind of show in this mock presentation. So in this case, I, as a presenter, I'm not going to get lost. I have my steps up here, right? I know what I need to talk about. I know it's coming, so it's being helpful. I'm holding some things back. All of this stuff, right? I'm holding some of this stuff back. For example, where the dogs came from, right? Or what specific drugs were used in the sedative, what security was available, was US Fish and Wildlife there or not? All of the kind of specifics that you know, because it's your project, okay, are in your brain and you can add to them as you present, but they don't need to be on the slide. And it's always nice if you have a picture of you doing something associated with your methods. So if that means take pictures of your stuff in the lab or take pictures of your stuff in the field or get a really nice picture of you like in action. Not everybody's going to be able to trio, you know, Florida Panther, but come up with some way to show you doing what you're doing. Again, you want the slides in the background. They should be paying attention to you, right? So anytime that you can replace words with an image, you need to do that, okay? You can see here another important piece when it comes to methods is that if you're using some standard methods, a standardized protocol, standardized, I don't know, primers, standardized trapping methods, anything like that, you need to cite those. Okay, so those citations aren't over just because your lit review is complete. A lot of times methods are full of citations. And it's helpful because you're showing that you're using practice methods, right? Ones that are accepted by the scientific community or your scientific community. And so you're kind of, again, you're establishing credibility, right? I use the method that we all use. I know what's going on here. So make sure you cite that, okay? Flow charts are also another great way to show what you've done and what data were collected. This is, again, one from a Florida Panther project, and it shows the data that were collected for each of the Panthers that were tagged using this method, right? So for each one, you can kind of go through this, and what you would do as the speaker in this case is talk them through that diagram. The diagram there is to help you, so you don't forget a step, right? It helps your audience so they can see the big picture, right? But it lets you be the storyteller, right? You are still an integral part of this. You're going to walk them through this slide piece by piece by piece. So you really can't use enough of those types of things when it comes to your methods. Your methods checklist, okay, make sure you're using that same order again, it's established. Use SmartArt for sequences and processes. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with that. I'm going to show you an example in a minute, but it lives right up here. So if you go to insert, you have all of these kind of options, and your 3D models and your SmartArt graphics are right here. So I'm going to show you guys how to use that in a second, but they're a great way to take a list of steps and make it a better image, right? Something that'll work better for you. You don't want to be overly detailed. You don't go over every decision, but your important choices, and you'll know this because it's your stuff, those need to be described. Please use first person. You don't need to be writing in passive voice on your slides. And you don't need to be speaking in passive voice. Passive is passive. It gets boring. No one wants to listen to it or read it. So make sure you're using first person. Acronyms and technical jargon are just a part of kind of giving a research talk. You will likely have to explain an acronym, and that's okay. But I would try not to use too many of them. I was recently watching a talk on human wildlife conflict, HWC, and by about halfway through the talk, I was so overloaded with acronyms that as an audience member, I was like exhausted. I mean, every other word was a different acronym, and I always had to be going back into my brain to get the letters in order. I was tuning out the speaker because I was trying to remember. It can be problematic. So I would limit those. Even if you explain them all, it's still, it gets arduous, right? So limit those and limit the jargon in general, especially for, again, remember your audience, especially for an audience who's not in the know exactly where you are on your project. And that's likely not what you're going to get at a scholar conference here on campus. You're going to have a more general audience. So limit the jargon as much as you can. Don't forget that you have to include methods for your data analysis, right? So if you used a particular statistical package or a modeling software, make sure that you discuss the statistical tests that you use. If you use an ANOVA, explain that. I used a one-way ANOVA, analysis of variance, with a two-tailed p-test, right? And post hoc hypothesis testing. Whatever the details are of the methods that you used, those do need to be in there so individuals know what's coming, right? Again, remember, part of your job is you're leading your audience through. You don't want them to be surprised. You don't want them to be like, what's happening? They should be asking questions the same time that you're giving them the answers. So if you're walking side by side, it just makes the process go a lot better and more smoothly. They'll get more out of it and it'll be more enjoyable. When it comes to your results, this section, I think it's super important. And I think students feel like all the hard part's done, so they don't need to focus on this too much. So they just grab whatever figure they have, grab whatever table they've had, paste it into a slide, say something about a hypothesis and move on. And that gets you about half the way there. Okay. What maybe looks okay in Excel might not look great on a PowerPoint slide. So this is an example of a table literally just copy pasted from Excel. You can see it's too small. There's all these extra rows and columns. It's not readable. It's not useful. It doesn't help you, the speaker, and the audience is getting nothing from this, right? This figure is okay. It's kind of an awkward shape. It's a little blurry. There's a part A here, right? So that's weird. I mean, you might have more. So it's like part A, B, C, and D, but your audience doesn't know that. That's going to confuse them. It's not ideal. The language here under results is also problematic and really typical. Okay? This hypothesis was wrong. This hypothesis was right. We proved it right. We were correct. We got the right answer. these are kind of typical things to see, and it's really not the language that we use in the sciences at all. We don't speak in terms of proof unless you're talking about geometry necessarily, right? We don't speak in terms of correct, true. We don't use those words. Instead, what you need to discuss when it comes to your results are focus on your data. It should be heavy with tables and figures. Show us what you learned. You don't have to necessarily tell us yet, okay? Show the audience what you've learned. And in terms of your hypotheses, you're going to discuss those in your discussion section, okay? So they don't even belong here. You can show your results in terms of testing for hypothesis 1 and testing for hypothesis 2, but we're not going to talk about who was right and who was wrong yet. We'll get there in a second. Excuse me. So this is a much better way to show that table, the exact same information. I've just made a nice table, right? It's clean, it's balanced, it's easy to read. Now, there's still way too much information on here, so you can use animations. Let's see, I'm gonna pop this back on so you can see. I would never recommend showing this table and expecting your audience to know all of it, but what you can do is use your shapes again to kind of highlight the pieces that you think are the most important as you talk about them. So if I'm going to talk about pit tagged versus recaptured kittens, and I'm going to compare those to the prime adult numbers, right? You can use these to kind of highlight the particular aspects of the table that your audience needs to know for your story, right? If it's all important, then you might have to make some decisions, right? About cutting some things out or telling smaller pieces of that story. When it comes to the figure, so all I did here is I just cleaned this figure up. I'll show you where that is. You just highlight it. Make sure I'm on my picture stuff. Go over here to, it's not going to let me correct it now because I've done a bunch of other stuff, but you hit corrections on this and then it'll let you add clarity and it just sharpens everything. I cut out this legend. You see here, it's over on this side. It wasn't letting me make the image the size I wanted. So I just snipped that out and reset it right here. So now it's contained and I can make it a little bit larger. And then I have hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 2 over here, and I'm speaking directly to the results that relate back to those hypotheses. You can also build in like arrows as you speak, right? So if I'm going to talk about kitten survivalship, I might have that arrow ready to go, pointing at the right bar. If I'm going to talk about subadult survivalship for males, again, I have an arrow ready to go because I'm getting ready to talk about that particular bar. So you want to be able to walk your audience through even a fairly, this figure is not that complicated. I've seen much more complicated stuff, right? It's a good one, but you need to be able to walk them through it piece by piece. You can't just go bam and expect everybody to absorb it. Your job is to lead them through this material. The other thing I added here was standard error. So if there's anything on your figure and it's not obvious what it is, you need to tell your audience, right? So if these are standard error bars, you need to tell them that somewhere. You can tell them that, right? Or you can put them on the slide as a reminder to yourself. I forget to do that. So I always put it on the slide. So it's a good reminder for myself. Okay, your results checklist. Order again. You're like, okay, Mountjoy, I get it. The order is important. I can't tell you how important it is, right? Especially because your audience is starting to feel comfortable with you, right? They're jiving with you. They're going, oh, okay, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3. And if all of a sudden you're like 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, you get it, right? All of a sudden they're like, whoa, wait, and everything gets like that scratch record. Okay, so the order is really, really, really important. Make sure that your data are telling the story. That word is plural, by the way, right? The data are telling the story, not the data is telling the story. Data is a plural word, so make sure you're using it that way. Make sure that your stats are written out the way they need to be written out. So for example, here, this is the results of a statistical test. This is the p-value, and then I've given the degrees of freedom and the range here, which is typical for a standard t-test. Okay. This is going to depend on the test that you're doing. Your mentor or advisor can help you through with this, right? But there's going to be a specific way that you report that. Do the degrees of freedom go in? Does the standard error? What's the test statistic that you need to use? All of that stuff. There's going to be a standard format that your statistical test belongs in. So make sure you do that. The order does matter when it comes to those things. So make sure you know the right way to include it in your PowerPoint. Provide the take-home message on these slides. You don't need to go over every little piece, right? Use boxes and arrows to highlight the most important pieces of your tables and your figures. Make sure your images are clean and clear. Make sure they're legible, right? Don't bury the lead. Sometimes you feel like all your results are super important, right? Now remember, your job is to tell a story. So you might have to weave around some of those results. You might even leave some out so you can tell a really nice, clean story. Be prepared to do that. Don't bury the lead with so much data, right, that your audience can't tease it out, or that you're trying to tease it out and you don't have time. Okay. Again, here, use the first person. I always think just the facts whenever I'm putting together a results section. And I don't mean use the word facts, but I think this is from, what was that show? Dragnet, I think, some like reruns on Nick at Night that I used to watch when I was a kid. And this detective would be like, ma'am, what happened? And she'd be like, oh my gosh. And she'd kind of go into this whole big, histrionics, and he'd go, just the facts, man, just the facts. So it stuck with me clearly, but be thinking that when you're putting your results slide together, okay? Just the facts. You're not talking about what your results mean at all. You are showing what your data are, right? You are providing your results. You are not commentating on them yet. Not at all. You're like, here they are. Okay. That's all you get to do in this section. It's not until your next section, right, the discussion, where you get to actually start to talk about what they mean. Okay. Again, same order, not surprised, right? I'm going to start with hypothesis 2 here, but you would have started with hypothesis 1. Okay. Now you're able to say how your results line up with your hypothesis. Okay. In this case, hypothesis 2, we're going to reject the null hypothesis because survival was significantly dependent on age. I don't need statistics there. I don't need to back that up. I've already done that in results. I'm reminding my audience, this was my hypothesis. These are my results. That means that we can reject the null. There's a relationship here. Okay? I have shown that to you. And then I'm giving them the highlights, right? Kittens had the lowest survival overall. And then I'm connecting that back into the literature. Is that more than you would think? Because I would think the survivability for babies of any animal is probably pretty low. And that's right. But I'm going to provide you with a source that says more than what you would expect. Okay, even more so than what you would expect. There's some evidence in the literature that this is due to roadkill, okay, which is sad, but is an important point to bring up here. So I'm saying, here's what I found. Here's how it connects to the literature. Okay, with each of these, you're discussing your results. This is what I found. This makes sense. This doesn't. This jives with what we know. This might be brand new. This doesn't jive at all with what we know. I don't understand why not. Now's where you get to discuss. Okay, so you just the facts it, and then you can discuss it in the discussion. Sometimes that feels duplicative. If the results in the discussion are feeling duplicative to you, then you've done too much talking in your results section and you have too many numbers in your discussion section. Okay, the numbers don't belong in the discussion and discussion doesn't belong in the results. So try to keep those like kind of clearly delineated. It'll be really helpful. The conclusion slide, this is my favorite part of the talk because this is when you broaden back out and you say, there's a really cool thing I did, this really cool story I've just told you about, these really interesting findings that I have, right? All of this matters. Okay, this is when you get to say, my stuff is important. And here is why. Maybe it helped us go, oh, we can cross that off the list. That relationship does not exist. Cool, that's great, right? That's important information. Or holy cow, there is a relationship there. That's really important. Maybe we need to explore that further. Okay, that's what goes in to this conclusion, right? Think about how your research could be applied more broadly. Does it have, for example, conservation implications? Does it have biomedical implications? Does it have implications in biotechnology, right? What does it mean? Why is it important? And this answer should like come from your heart at this point. If this is a project that you've been working on, you know why it's important. It's probably a lot of what you've been thinking about and a lot of what's motivated you. So just make sure it comes across, right? And this kind of tail end of your PowerPoint. This is also where if you need to talk about anything that came up, anything that you might do looking ahead, right? Moving forward, you can add that here in the conclusion section as well. This is just kind of wrapping things up. You give a big take-home message, you talk about why it's important, you end on a really, really, really strong note. I forgot to mention up here with your discussion section, after you've gone through and discussed your particular hypotheses, this is also where you say, well, there's this weird thing that happened. I'm not quite sure. Talk about any kind of limitations. Maybe we caught a whole lot more female kittens than males, and that might have biased our results. Anything wonky, right, is the word I always use with my students. Anything kind of sticking in your craw that you think is a little weird, right? You might bring that up here. You can call it a limitation if you want to. It's a decent word to use. It's just anything that you're being transparent, right? And you're saying, okay, these are issues that came up in my research. It doesn't mean that what you found is invalid. It just is a consideration that needs to be understood. Considerations is another great word to use instead of limitations. Okay, so I would probably favor that one because it doesn't sound so limiting. All right, your discussion and conclusion checklist is here. Your discussion is where you reject or fail to reject your null, talk about what your data do support, connects your literature, connects your findings back into the literature. There should be citations in your discussion section as well, right? You have to make that connection kind of full circle. In your conclusion section, think big picture. What are your contributions to the scientific dialectic, right? This is big stuff. You've learned something new. You should be super proud, right? Tell your audience why it's important, okay? After you do that, you're going to have kind of a references or an acknowledgement slide where you acknowledge any help that you got, any funding sources, and then kind of a citations or references slide, and then a slide where you say, you know, does anyone have questions? And then you cross your fingers and hope that nobody has questions. Okay, so that gets us through just the basic anatomy. Does anybody have any questions about that before I finish up with these last couple sections? That was definitely the bulk of the talk, but I want to go through some tips and tricks in these last 3 areas before I let you guys go. Okay, so let's get into prep a little bit. I'm going to use the PowerPoint word and you're all going to roll your eyes, and that's fine. I'm going to use it anyway. You need to be in PowerPoint. Okay. If you decide to use slides or something that's more collaborative, if you're working with a team, totally fine. But your PowerPoint, your presentation needs to end up in PowerPoint. Okay. And that's not because I'm an old fogey and I think it's the only thing that works. I totally get that other platforms have really great properties, especially if you're working in a collaborative way. But PowerPoint by far and away has the most functionality, like 10 times the functionality of those other platforms. And you're missing out. You're making your life more difficult, and you're missing out on some really great functionality in terms of preparing your PowerPoint slides. Okay. Most of those kind of things that you're missing out on are about your ability to manipulate your slides. And I mean, tweak images and move things around and add cool animations and add good backgrounds and all of that stuff. PowerPoint by far and away has the most tools to let you do this, right? So if you're into that, if you're into like having control over your content, you want to end up in PowerPoint. I'm just going to give you an example. Okay. So I just kind of randomly typed out this list, like my favorite things about PowerPoint, right? Useful, little known, and overlooked. Here's the list. This is boring. I would never present this. Okay. But it's really simple to turn this into something that I would be perfectly happy to present. I'll show you. I'm just going to copy this stuff. Is everybody taking notes? I hope you are. I'm just going to copy this stuff. I'm going to go up here, insert, smart art. Do I have a list? Yes, I have a list. I'm going to insert this sucker. Okay. All right. Bam. How awesome is that? Okay, so now my list looks a little better, right? And I can manipulate this a little bit more if I kind of want the shape to match my slide size a little better. Okay, cool. That was easy, right? So in some of those other platforms, you would painfully have to create each one of these images and add in the text one at a time. That's a pain in the butt. This, you can do all of the hard work, and then Smart Art can do the heavy lifting for you and put it into a format that is much more approachable. The other cool thing that you get from PowerPoint is the animations feature. They have kind of a bulk animations feature that most of those other platforms are lacking. So let me show you what that looks like. You know, I could add an animation where all of these boxes show up at one time, but it's really useful when you're creating your slides to be able to have things come in as you talk about them, right? Especially if you have a big slide with all these words on it, right? You don't want to kind of overwhelm your audience with everything all at once. You can go to animations, and I'm going to say, yes, I want this to appear. Big deal. Lots of platforms do that. But what this will also do for you in 1 or 2 clicks is every box can appear when you click. Okay, so you can come over here to your effect options and click one by one. And now it's time for the test. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it took me like less than 5 minutes to take that really kind of boring list and not only kind of make it more visually appealing, but also get it into a format where I can kind of talk about these one by one or discuss them as I bring them up. Okay, so that's just an example. And here are more, right here in front of us. Lots of platforms won't let you group as many images as PowerPoint. So, you know, this old trick where you pull something and hit control and you can kind of group things together. You go to the group function over here, and then you can move all of those things together instead of moving things one at a time. It's like when you finish a slide, you really like the way it looks, but you just want to nudge some things over. So it's a really kind of powerful tool. If you ever have objects, so depending on where you're getting your stuff from, what kind of program, you can copy an object and paste it back in as a photo and make it any size you want. I end up doing this with SmartArt a lot. So SmartArt is an object. If I wanted this to be like the whole page, I get all this weirdness when I go to kind of size it, and I don't want it to look that way, right? I want it to look like this, just bigger. So I can grab this graphic. It's all separated out by right now because I had it on animations. I'm going to click that off. I'm going to go over here to, to home, paste, and you can use this paste as a picture option. Well, now I can resize this however I want, right? That is a really super useful tool. It's not as useful necessarily for this example, but it is a really useful tool to be able to paste absolutely anything as an image. WordArt and SmartArt are great. That's what I've used this in, is SmartArt. I don't use WordArt quite as much. Some people do. I prefer SmartArt. It's just a really nice, clean way to get a lot of text into a usable format. Slide sorter is super cool. Let me show you guys that. Go to, is it slideshow? No, it is review, view. Yeah, view. Okay, so go into view. There are 2 things I want to show you here in view. Slide Master is great. This will let you kind of make all of your slides the same. So one reason I think students love picking a theme is that it makes everything the same. So like all of your title font will be Arial size 40, and all your subtitles will be Times New Roman size 20, right? Kind of throughout, and that way you don't have to worry about consistency. That's exactly what this does. So you can choose all your fonts, you can decide what you want to happen to them at what level, and it will make it consistently like that throughout. You can pick a theme here too, right? If you want. I never use themes. I always just use the basic plain. And if Designer wants to help me use cool slides and stuff, I kind of let Designer lead the way on that instead of using themes. I'll show you that in just a second. The other really cool one is Slide Sorter. So this will show you all your slides at a go. And you can kind of move them around, drag and drop, whatever you need. You can take 4 or 5 and move them here, 4 or 5 and move them there. You can do that the other way too, but there's just something about seeing so many of them together that I think is really useful. Let me go back here. Okay, back to normal. Icons are available everywhere, but PowerPoint has an enormous library of icons. So when you go to insert, it's one of your options over here. Icons, think of this as like your professional clip art. It's what I used up here, right? These little icons. So if you can't really think of an image that you would want to use, but your slide needs something, icons is a great place to go. It does the transparency trick, which I showed you earlier. The black overlay is a nice touch. I use the snip tool all the time. That is not unique to PowerPoint, but because you can insert anything that you would like as a separate image, it does kind of increase the functionality. The embedded video functions are great, depending on what you want to show. If you have videos that you think are important. We've talked about animations a little bit. Oh, the specific size dimensions are really nice. So you guys know you can click on just about anything. What would be good? Like this little image here. And as long as you're on your picture formatting tools, let's see. There you go. Height and width are down here. So if you have like 3 pictures and you want to get them all the exact same size, this is where you would come, right? You might need to work with cropping a little bit, but you can highlight them all and get them all the exact same size, which I think is really useful. Another great trick is using the grid, the Snap to grid. So you can go up here to view and you have the ruler, which I always leave on. These grid lines are great. They can help you with balance, right, as you're moving things around. And you can also set up guides, right, to kind of have your center point. I use those functions a lot. There are lots of different effects that you can give your images. The kind of sharpen tool that I showed you earlier is one. I'll show you one that I use all the time because I have this as an image now, right? Because I saved it as an image. Just going to crop it real quick. So maybe I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. I just kind of wish it stood out a little more on the page. I'm in picture format. I use this a lot, this kind of drop shadow. So it's a subtle thing that just gives a little bit more emphasis, right, as you go through. Sections is something that I love and I use a lot. You can come over anywhere you want. Let's say I'm going to have a new section right here, right? Because it's my new prep section. You just go, let's see, home, add section, and then you can title this like, let's call it prep. And now you can collapse that section or expand that section. So it just kind of helps you focus and keep things arranged like you need to. Designer is awesome, but it is a tool, and like any other tool, it will only be as useful as you can make it be for yourself, right? The way Designer works, I'm going to come back to my SpongeBob slide. I'm going to give it a title. I'm going to throw this picture on there and Designer is going to pop up. So Designer is available in PowerPoint 2016 and beyond. And it's just going to give you all kinds of choices, right, for what you want that slide to look like. Some of them are better than others, right? But this is a nice kind of way to have other ideas thrown at you, kind of like a theme, but the theme can get in your way, right? And the Designer, I think, is just a little bit more useful. And you can edit after that, right? You can make whatever choices you want to make. Once they're, you select an option over here, you can change whatever you like after that, right? You still move things around and edit it. So it's just a nice place to start. And it gives you basically ideas. Like this would look cool as a slide, or this would look cool as a slide. And then, you can be the judge. Don't be afraid to edit images a lot, right? So this is an image of Florida and you have kind of a lot of different land uses here. This is a horrible image. You can't read the legend at all. So when you have something like this, use the tools that you guys know how to use. I took a snip right here. I just took a little snip right out of this gray area and got this gray rectangle. Okay, there's my first job. And then I rewrote the legend items here. I'm just going to slide those right on top of that. I'm going to group these two things together and I'm going to slide them right there. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's more legible, right? You can manipulate these figures as much as you need to. So keep in mind that you have that ability, right? I could come in here, I could kind of crop this area out. Maybe you don't need to see all of that. I could sharpen it up a little bit, change the contrast, get it to a point where it's usable. If you have a figure that is perfect, except for these few things, try fixing them, right? PowerPoint has a lot of tools that you can use. I've mentioned this a couple times and I cannot go over this enough. Once you pick a theme, your theme is not in charge of you, okay? You are in charge of your theme and you can chuck it anytime. Okay? I have seen students bend over backwards to make sure the random diagonal line in the right corner is shown, right? Or they scrunch their image over here because they have like 2 bubbles in the corner and it's part of their theme. It does not matter, okay? If your theme is getting in your way, even once, even a little bit, get rid of it, right? You can make lots of really interesting, consistent PowerPoint slides without committing to a kind of boxed in theme. Lots of times themes and even designer will force you to have a lot of white space at the top. It'll scoot your titles down. It'll scoot your text in the middle. You won't have nearly the amount of workable space, okay? It's your canvas, you use it, you're in charge. You do not have to kind of pay homage to that theme. You don't have to use designer. A lot of what I've just said is here for you. So this is your reference here, right? Your do and your do not list when you're thinking about prepping your PowerPoint or your slide deck for your talk. Let's talk a little bit about practice. So this is important because, because this is reality. I'm gonna move back into my slideshow now. Best intentions often go astray, right? Of mice and men. So you have to practice because even though you think things will go one way, you'll often find that they definitely do not. You can end up like that poor baby elephant. Practice really does 2 things, right? 1, it helps ensure that your presentation is on point, right? And 2, you have a whole round of editing to do while you practice. You'd be like, okay, I finished my PowerPoint. It is awesome. I have 30 slides and it is amazing. And you go to do your talk and by slide 2, you're like, oh, I don't know what to say for this slide. I don't know what to say for the next slide. I don't know how to transition. I don't have the right things on there. I keep forgetting this part and that part's not included. And I went way too long in this section. It is rough, okay? So be prepared to get your PowerPoint done and then make tons of changes as you practice. Because some things are going to be really natural to you. You won't have a problem talking about them. You don't need them on the slide. Other things you will not be able to get in your memory no matter what. It has to go on a slide. Okay, so be prepared to keep some stuff and toss other stuff. This is a main point, okay? You are the main character. Your PowerPoint is not. You're the person who the audience should be paying attention to. Remember, you're a storyteller. You have to make that connection. You have to make that eye contact. Once you get an audience on your side, nothing feels better on the planet, okay? But if your PowerPoint slides is what everyone's looking at while you kind of mumble along with your head down and eyes down, you don't get to be the star, okay? So make sure that they stay in the background. I use my slides all the time for stuff I'll forget. In particular, names, any kind of number whatsoever, specific details that I need to remember. So sometimes my slides are literally my fallback, right? And I can go to them if I need to, but not always. It just depends, okay? When you're thinking about what to keep and what to throw away, if a slide isn't moving you forward in your talk, it goes, okay? I don't care if you love the image. I don't care if you think it's wonderful. I don't care if you worked so hard on that one part of the methods. If it isn't moving your story forward, get rid of it, okay? You need to focus on what moves the story, what leads to progress, and get rid of what doesn't. There's a really cool notes function in PowerPoint. I thought everybody knew about this until recently. It's right here. I use this function when I'm starting to prep, right? Oh, these are the things I want to say on this slide. These are the points to get across on this one. Don't forget this piece. And I'll type it all in there. Now, by the time I'm done practicing, I better not need those notes, okay? But it's a good way to sort your thoughts while you're deciding what you're going to go over for each of your slides. Sad truth. There's absolutely nothing that will replace practice, and you need to do it a lot. Now, if that means you have to do all of that research, get your PowerPoint perfect, go through your PowerPoint, practice and revise it, you need to start early on this. This is not a last minute thing, okay? And you can practice to any of these things you want, right? An empty room, the mirror. You can hold your friends hostage and make them listen to you. You can find your teddy bear from home. You can talk to a plant. I hear they like that, okay? It does not matter. But something happens in your brain when you speak out loud, okay? It's a different kind of memory. It's a different kind of core memory. You're creating new grooves, right? So you have to say this out loud. For all the most important presentations that I have ever given, I have gotten to the point where I could sit in my car and present, I know what slide is next, and I know what I need to say. And check my timings as I go. Okay, so you've got to get this part done. I will also say standing up does something different too. Okay, so I might practice originally sitting down, and then once I'm like getting real, stand up every time. Okay, it'll make a difference. Make sure you know your timings, use your phone. I've got mine running right now. Okay, so I have an idea of where I am, and I know I've got just a little bit of time left. I think I'm doing okay though, Leah. PowerPoint has an awesome rehearse timings box. So you can kind of watch your timings for each section, and PowerPoint will keep track of them for you over time. So you can see how you're doing, if you're getting better or not. One thing to keep in mind is that you will present quicker than you practice. So if you're like a minute or two over, I wouldn't sweat it. The nerves will take care of that. Okay. In fact, it's one of the big ones that we'll talk about when it comes to actual delivery. Okay. So I know the nerves, if you have like secondhand anxiety, just while I'm talking about this, I totally understand. Okay. I feel you. We can get through it together. Okay. Before you present, you are going to own this venue. This venue is all about you. You have the right to know how it's set up. You can ask all of those questions. What do I have available? How big will the screen be? If you can, go see it. Okay. You should feel great. My mom would say, oh, don't you want to look so cute? I'm like, well, whatever feeling great means to you. I don't know. If it means a new outfit, great, right? If it means a really nice old comfort outfit, great. You should still look nice and put together. Okay. But whatever makes you feel good. You do you before your talk. If that means you want to eat, eat. If not, then don't. Work out, veg out, chill out. It doesn't matter. Whatever you need to do, right, to find your happy place. Once you get to the venue, like I said, the venue belongs to you. Okay. If you need, I always have to bring the podium down. Sometimes I have to move whole monitors because when I stand up, I'm only 5'2". I tell people I'm 5'3", but I oftentimes have to move the monitor so people can see my face, right? I sometimes move things out of the way because I like to walk around a lot while I talk. I want to take ownership of that whole room, that whole stage, the whole dais, whatever they've given me, that's mine, right? So I kind of like to walk around and get my sin on everything and really take ownership of that space. Okay, so make sure you can do that. If you need particular things, pointers, anything like that, make sure you bring them with you. Okay. As far as the talk goes, and you should practice this, thanks for that introduction. Okay. If you're going to be introduced. If you're not, introduce yourself, but you can ask that question, right, before you give your talk. Don't read your slides. It's an absolute killer. Okay. They should be supporting you, right? But you should not be relying on them. You should not need notes. Okay? This should be something that you are ready to stand up on your own and do. You can refer to your slides, don't read them. When you flub up, if stuff happens, do your best not to apologize. I'm really bad about this myself, sorry. But you don't need to apologize. You're up there doing your best. The audience is here to listen to you. They want you to succeed. You don't need to apologize. As much as possible, you want to watch your tempo and your speed. First couple slides, you're going to have the jitters, and then things will really slow down. Find places where you can force yourself to breathe. Your audience will breathe with you. Okay, so find those moments. Make sure you're making eye contact. Find a couple nodders. They exist in every audience, the good listeners, and they'll nod at you and smile. Find them, use them. Okay, try your best not to fidget. I had a colleague who did this weird leg kick thing whenever he got nervous. He's up there giving a presentation to hundreds of people, and then whoop, there we go his leg. It was so weird. So try not to fidget, but use your space. When it comes to questions, relax. You're done. You're finished with your talk. Okay. And understand that you really are the expert in the room. Best advice I can give you is be prepared with some comebacks when you get questions that maybe you don't have a perfect answer to. Okay. You should be able to pull some stuff out of your pocket. Like, what a great idea. I never thought about that before. Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah. For next time, I think that is an excellent point. That is a great observation. I'm really glad. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Don't be defensive, right? Be grateful. Everybody there is asking you these questions and bringing up these points because they think they're being helpful. Okay. So just keep that smile on your face and have some things to pull out of your pocket so you feel ready, even if the question is something that you didn't directly address or you don't know an exact answer to. Okay. All right, so that's going to be all my time. Basics, remember your storyteller. Remember connection is important, okay? And if we have time, I'll take questions. I don't want to keep you guys too long.